In the depths of the galaxy, there existed a race known as the Lyrians. Once powerful and respected, they had now been cast aside by the Galactic Council. The Council, a coalition of different alien species, had made the decision to exile the Lyrians to a faraway planet. The Lyrians were blamed for their cultural differences, their long-standing traditions, and their beliefs that the Council had deemed primitive. They were pushed away, out of sight, to a barren and desolate world. This planet, named Scifi, was a place where survival was a constant challenge. The air was thin, and the landscape was dotted with jagged rocks and endless deserts. The Lyrians had once thrived on a vibrant world, rich with resources and trade. Now, all they had was this cold, empty land. The Lyrians struggled to adapt. Their homes were gone, their cities abandoned, and their future uncertain. The people were divided. Some refused to accept their fate, while others quietly accepted their exile. Among them was a young woman named Lyra, who had lived through the fall of their civilization. She had seen the glory of their past, and she could not simply let it end here, in the cold desert of Typhor. Lyra watched the other members of her race as they tried to rebuild their lives. Some tried to cultivate the land, though little grew in the barren soil. Others worked to repair old technology that had been left behind. But even the most determined among them could not escape the feeling of despair that lingered in the air. They were alone, isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Lyra refused to give up. She believed that the Lyrians were not finished, that they were not just a lost race. She gathered a small group of followers, those who still had hope, and they began to work in secret. They studied the stars, searching for ways to communicate with other civilizations. Lyra knew that there were still allies out there, races who might help them. But the challenge was immense. No one in the galaxy would dare speak out against the Galactic Council. The Lyrians were no longer respected. They were seen as a mistake, a race best forgotten. But what Lyra didn't know was that someone was watching. A human explorer, far from home, had detected the signal from Scifi. He had heard rumors of the Lyrians' exile and was curious. He knew of their fall from grace, but something about the story struck him. How could a race that had once been so powerful be thrown away so easily? This human, named Noah, was not like the others. He had seen injustice in the galaxy before, and he had always tried to stand against it. Now, as he drifted through the vast reaches of space, he found himself drawn to Scifi. Little did he know, his arrival would change everything. Lyra's small group had been working in the shadows for weeks. They spent their nights studying ancient texts and old maps, hoping to find some clue, some sign that there was a way off Scifi. The Council had cast them out, but they were not ready to accept that their story was over. Lyra knew that the galaxy had forgotten them, but she refused to forget the strength and power of her people. She believed that the Lyrians could rise again, but they needed help. One evening, as the twin moons of Scifi rose high above the cracked surface of the planet, Lyra stood on a hill, gazing up at the stars. She had spent so many nights in silence, wondering if someone might hear their plea. What if they could reach out to the galaxy again? What if someone could answer? At that moment, something caught her eye. Something strange in the sky. It was a bright light, moving fast across the heavens. It was unlike any ship the Lyrians had ever seen, and it wasn't a military vessel from the Council. The ship was smaller, sleek, and unmarked. Lyra's heart raced. Was this it? Was someone finally coming? She quickly gathered her closest followers, those who still believed in the future of their people. They climbed to the highest point of their settlement and waited, watching the sky. The ship drew closer, and Lyra's hope grew. Soon, the ship landed softly in the sand, its engines humming quietly. The door to the ship opened, and out stepped a figure, a human. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of humans before, but she had never met one. This human, named Noah, stepped onto the dusty ground of Scifi, looking around with cautious eyes. His uniform was simple but neat, and his face was filled with both curiosity and determination. Lyra approached cautiously, her mind racing with questions. Why was this human here? What did he want? And how could he help? Noah's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was silence. He could see the desperation in her eyes, but also the spark of something much more powerful, determination. It was something he understood well. "I've come to help," Noah said, his voice steady. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "Help?" she asked, unsure if she could trust him. "Why would you help us? The galaxy has forgotten us." Noah looked at her with a calm understanding. "I know what the council did to your people. I know they cast you aside. But I also know this: humanity has always fought for the underdog. We don't leave our allies behind. And right now, you need help." Lyra hesitated. The human's words were comforting. But could she trust him? Could humanity really help them after all this time? "Tell me more," she said, her voice filled with both hope and skepticism. Noah nodded. "I don't know how I can help yet, but I've come to find a way. Together, we can fight back. The galaxy might not be ready to listen yet, but we can make them." Lyra felt the weight of his words sink in. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, their people could rise again. But it would take more than just one human and one alien race. It would take a spark to ignite a rebellion. And Noah, the human who had come across the galaxy, might just be the spark they needed. Over the next few weeks, Noah worked alongside Lyra and her followers, slowly earning their trust. They shared stories of their past, of the once great empire the Lyrians had built, their cities filled with music and laughter, their innovations that had shaped their world. But now, all of that was gone, and Sci-Fi was their prison. Noah listened with compassion. He had seen the way the galaxy often treated those it considered weaker, and he couldn't accept that the Lyrians deserved to be forgotten. His people had faced their own struggles in the past, and though they were different, they had always been willing to stand up for what was right. He saw that same courage in the eyes of Lyra and the others. One evening, they gathered around a makeshift table in a dimly lit cave, studying an old star map Lyra had found in the ruins of their old city. Noah pointed to a series of coordinates, a group of planets far from Sci-Fi. "These are the closest systems," he said, tapping the map with his finger. "If we can contact these worlds, maybe we can get their support." Lyra looked over the map with a skeptical expression. "You think they'll help us? The galaxy has already turned its back on us." "We can't know until we try," Noah replied firmly. "I'll reach out to my people. There's bound to be someone who understands your struggle, someone who will stand with you." The next day, Noah sent a signal to Earth. He wasn't sure who would respond, but he had faith that someone would listen. The message he sent was simple but powerful, outlining the plight of the Lyrians and requesting assistance. The galaxy had many powerful forces, but it also had those who valued justice. It would take time, but he believed there was hope. Days passed, and tensions began to rise on Sci-Fi. The Council's forces were moving closer, and their scouts had started to monitor the planet more closely. Lyra's group had grown more restless, unsure if they could truly stand against such a mighty enemy. The fear of the Council's wrath weighed heavily on them. Some began to question Noah's promises, unsure if help would ever arrive. But Noah remained steadfast. "We're not alone," he told them. "We just need to be patient and hold on. Help is on the way." Just as the situation began to feel hopeless, a message came through from Earth. It wasn't from the Council or any galactic authority. It was from a human diplomat, a woman named Captain Emma Keller. She had heard Noah's message, and she believed in the cause. "I'm coming," her message said. "We're not the only ones who care." The news spread quickly through the Lyrian camp. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered in their hearts. Someone was coming to help. Noah turned to Lyra, his eyes filled with determination. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We'll show the galaxy that the Lyrians are not to be underestimated. And together, we'll make sure that no one is forgotten." Lyra nodded, a spark of hope reigniting in her chest. She had feared that their fight was a lost cause, but now, with Noah's help and the promise of allies, it seemed possible that the Lyrians might find their place in the galaxy again. The news of Captain Emma Keller's arrival spread like wildfire across Sci-Fi. For the first time in months, the Lyrians felt something they hadn't dared to hope for. Hope. Lyra, still cautious but filled with a renewed sense of purpose, led her people in preparing for the arrival of their first real allies. Noah worked tirelessly, coordinating plans with the humans. Captain Keller had promised a small fleet, but that small fleet was all they needed to get started. They couldn't fight the Council directly yet, but they could send a message. The galaxy needed to understand that the Lyrians would not bow down quietly. As the day of the first major battle approached, tensions reached a boiling point. The Galactic Council had sent scouts to Sci-Fi, growing suspicious of the sudden activity on the planet. A large fleet was en route, ready to crush any sign of rebellion before it could spread. Time was running out. Lyra stood in the center of the camp, looking out at the dusty horizon. The human fleet, led by Captain Keller, had arrived, and the first signs of battle were near. Noah joined her, his face filled with determination. "They'll be here soon," he said, his voice steady. "Are you ready?" Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "We have no choice. We must fight. For our people. For our future." The first clash came sooner than expected. The Galactic Council's fleet, a group of warships and heavily armed patrol crafts, arrived in the Typhor system, ready to annihilate the Lyrians and anyone who supported them. They had underestimated the humans, though. Captain Keller and her fleet weren't there just to fight. They were there to win. Noah and Lyra stood side by side as the battle began. The human ships were smaller than the Council's, but they were agile and fast. The Lyrians, though outmatched, fought with a fire that had been dormant for far too long. They used their knowledge of the planet and the terrain to their advantage, hiding in the canyons and ambushing the Council's forces. Noah had devised a strategy, an unconventional one. The Lyrians, with their ancient technology, would lay traps on the ground while the humans fought the enemy in space. It was a bold plan, but it had one advantage: surprise. The battle raged on for hours. The Council's fleet tried to regroup, but they didn't anticipate the Lyrians' guerrilla tactics. Noah watched from the command center, guiding the forces with precision. Despite their limited resources, humanity's ingenuity and the Lyrians' fierce determination created a deadly combination. As the final wave of the battle began, Noah saw the chance they had been waiting for: a gap in the Council's defense. "Now," he shouted to Lyra, "now's our chance." With swift coordination, Lyra's forces launched a decisive strike, targeting the heart of the Council's fleet. It wasn't a full victory, but it was enough to show the galaxy that the Lyrians would not be silenced. The Council was forced to retreat, their ships limping away from the battle, humiliated by the unexpected resistance. The humans and Lyrians had won their first victory, but the war was far from over. Lyra stood tall as the dust settled. She looked at Noah, gratitude and determination in her eyes. "We've taken the first step," she said quietly, "but the hardest part is yet to come." Noah nodded, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. The victory over the Council's fleet was celebrated across Sci-Fi, but the path forward was far from clear. While some of the Lyrians rejoiced at their first taste of freedom, others were uncertain. The fear of retaliation from the Galactic Council still loomed large, and not all of the Lyrians were convinced that Noah's alliance with the humans was the right choice. Lyra stood on a rocky outcrop, staring at the horizon. The winds of Sci-Fi carried the scent of dust and harsh terrain, but to Lyra, it felt like a distant reminder of the world they had lost. She had seen the humans fight beside them, risking everything, but now there were whispers among her own people. Some of them were beginning to doubt. "I'm not sure if we can trust them," a voice said from behind her. It was Torin, one of her closest allies. He had always been cautious, and lately he had been growing more vocal in his concerns. The humans are using us to further their own agenda. They'll leave us the moment they get what they want. Lyra turned, meeting his gaze. Noah has promised to help us. He has given us his word. They'll stand by us. Torin shook his head. You've seen how quickly alliances shift in this galaxy. The Council will come back stronger. If we don't prepare for that, we'll all be crushed. Lyra's heart sank. She knew there was truth in what Torin said. The Council was not easily defeated, and even a small victory like this could bring swift retaliation. But she also couldn't ignore the possibility that Noah and the humans had the strength and resources they needed to fight on. She had to believe in them. There was no other option. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. The Lyrians fortified their defenses and built new alliances. But behind the scenes, Torin's words began to spread. Some of the Lyrians were starting to question whether Noah's presence was a blessing or a curse. They feared that relying too heavily on the humans would leave them vulnerable. Noah, too, could sense the growing tension. He had always been a diplomat, able to read people and understand their fears, but this was different. The stakes were higher now, and the cracks in their unity were becoming more apparent. If he didn't find a way to mend the rift, everything they had worked for could unravel. One evening, as Noah met with Lyra to discuss their next steps, the situation grew worse. Torin stormed into the room, his face red with anger. You think they're here to help us? He spat. The humans are only here to control us. They're using us as pawns in their own game. Noah stood up, his eyes narrowing. That's not true, he said, his voice calm but firm. I've risked everything to help you, and I'll continue to do so. But I won't stand for anyone questioning our alliance. The room was tense, and for a moment, it seemed like a full-blown confrontation might erupt. But Lyra stepped in, her voice steady but filled with authority. Enough, both of you. We are all on the same side here. We cannot afford to turn against each other now. But Torin's doubts were not easily dismissed. Over the next few days, his influence grew, and the rift within the Lyrians deepened. Some were beginning to listen to his warnings, while others stood firmly with Noah and the humans. The fragile unity they had built was starting to crack. Lyra knew that she had to make a choice. She could no longer ignore the division in her people, but could she find a way to unite them before it was too late? As the days passed, the tension within the Lyrian camp only grew. The division between those who trusted the humans and those who didn't became more pronounced. Lyra knew that if they didn't find a way to unite the people, their fragile alliance would fall apart, and the Council would have an easier time destroying them all. She spent long hours alone, walking the rocky hills of Sci-Fi, trying to think of a solution. She had always believed that the strength of the Lyrians came from their unity, but now that unity was slipping away. She needed something more than words to heal the divide. She needed to remind them all why they were fighting. One evening, while searching through the ruins of an ancient Lyrian city, Lyra stumbled upon something unexpected. She had been here before, many times, but tonight felt different. As she passed through a broken archway, her foot hit something hard beneath the dirt. She knelt down, brushing away the dust to reveal a hidden hatch in the ground. Curious, Lyra pulled the hatch open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. Without hesitation, she descended into the unknown. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in old symbols she had never seen before. But there was something about the place that felt important, as if it held the key to her people's future. At the bottom of the stairs, she found a large chamber filled with ancient technology, machines and devices she couldn't understand. Some of them were broken, but others seemed to be still functional. There were old data terminals scattered across the room, and the walls were lined with strange markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. Lyra's heart raced. She had heard stories of the great technological achievements of the Lyrians, but most of it had been lost when they were exiled. It seemed that they had hidden something powerful here, something that could change the course of their future. She activated one of the data terminals, and a holographic map appeared before her. It showed star systems, planets, and hidden locations, many of which she had never seen before. The map was old, but it was detailed, and it seemed to hold the answers to questions no one had thought to ask. One location on the map caught her attention. It was a planet far from Sci-Fi, one that wasn't marked on any current maps. This was where the Lyrians had hidden their greatest secrets. Lyra's fingers hovered over the coordinates, and she felt a surge of excitement. This was the key to their future. This was the place that could bring their people back to power. She quickly sent a message to Noah, asking for help in investigating this new discovery. She didn't know exactly what lay there, but she knew it was important. She had to find out. When Noah arrived, he was as intrigued as she was. Together, they studied the map and prepared for the journey. But there was something else, something Lyra hadn't told him yet. The map also showed a warning, written in an ancient Lyrian language. Those who seek this place will awaken a force they cannot control. Lyra hesitated. She didn't know what this warning meant, but she knew that this discovery could be the turning point they had been waiting for. If they were to defeat the Council, they needed every advantage they could find. And this planet might be the answer. With Noah's support, Lyra made the decision. They would follow the map and uncover the secrets of the Lyrian past, no matter the cost. The journey to the hidden planet was long and difficult. The coordinates Lyra had found led them to a distant star system, one that was far off the usual trade routes. As they traveled, the tension among the Lyrians remained high. Some still didn't trust Noah and the humans, but they had no choice now. They had to work together to survive. Lyra, Noah, and their small crew made their way through the unknown reaches of space. The ship they traveled on was modest, but it was fast and efficient. As they neared the planet, Lyra's heart began to race. She knew this place held the key to their future, but she also couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The warning on the map had lingered in her mind, and the closer they got to their destination, the more uneasy she became. The planet was dark, its surface covered in thick clouds that blocked out the sun. It looked lifeless from space, but Lyra knew better. She had to believe that whatever lay beneath the surface was worth the risk. As they descended through the clouds, the ship shook violently. The atmosphere was unstable, and the sensors on the ship went haywire. "Hold on," Noah shouted as the ship rocked again, the warning lights flashing. Lyra gripped the edge of her seat, heart pounding. They had to make it down. If they turned back now, the Council's forces would catch up to them, and they would never have another chance to uncover the secrets of this place. With a final jolt, the ship landed hard on the planet's surface. The ground was soft and uneven, and the air was thick with the scent of something ancient. Lyra could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. She led the group out of the ship, and they began to move through the dense fog that surrounded them. The planet seemed to be alive in a strange way, with an energy that pulsed beneath the surface. As they ventured deeper, they found the entrance to an underground facility, a massive structure hidden beneath the planet's crust. The doors were heavy and covered in the same ancient symbols that Lyra had seen in the ruins of Sci-Fi. She could barely contain her excitement as they stepped inside, the air cool and still. The walls of the facility were lined with strange technology, but this was different from anything they had seen before. It was far more advanced, almost as if it had been created by a civilization far older than the Lyrians themselves. As they explored, Lyra felt an unsettling sense of being watched. Every step echoed in the silence, and the weight of the unknown hung heavily in the air. Suddenly, a low hum filled the chamber. The lights flickered on, revealing a massive core in the center of the room. It was a machine, one that seemed to pulse with energy. It was unlike anything the Lyrians had ever seen, and Lyra couldn't help but feel drawn to it. "Noah, this is it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "This is what we've been looking for." But as they approached, the hum grew louder, and the temperature in the room began to rise. The warning on the map echoed in Lyra's mind once again. Those who seek this place will awaken a force they cannot control. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She had hoped for a discovery that would change their future, but what if this wasn't the gift it seemed to be? What if it was a trap? As the core glowed brighter, Lyra realized they had no choice. They had come this far, and the future of her people depended on what happened next. She turned to Noah, her voice firm. We have to activate it. Whatever it is, it's the only chance we have. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had just opened a door to something much darker than they had ever imagined. As Lyra and Noah approached the glowing core, the tension in the air was palpable. The hum from the machine grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. The light intensified, filling the chamber with a strange, almost hypnotic glow. Every instinct in Lyra told her to step back, to leave the chamber before they awakened something they couldn't control. But there was no turning back now. This is it, Lyra, Noah said, his voice steady but filled with a sense of awe. We've come this far. We can't turn away from it now. Lyra nodded, but her heart raced with uncertainty. She had hoped that this discovery would be their salvation. But now, as the machine pulsed with energy, she couldn't help but feel a deep unease. Was it a gift or a curse? What if they were about to unleash something terrible on their people? We need to activate it, she said, her voice shaky but firm. It's the only way. Noah approached the core, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface. As his touch made contact, the core flickered to life, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. The walls around them began to shift, and hidden doors opened to reveal more advanced technology than Lyra had ever imagined. This was not just a weapon, it was something far greater. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them. The chamber began to crack, and a blinding light filled the room. Lyra stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been right to feel uneasy. Something was wrong. They had awakened something they couldn't control. Noah reached out to grab her arm, pulling her back toward the exit. We need to leave now, he shouted. But it was too late. A deep mechanical voice filled the chamber, its tone cold and distant. You have awakened the Guardians. Prepare for your judgment. Lyra froze, her mind racing. Guardians, what are you talking about? The voice echoed again. We are the ancient protectors of this planet. You have disturbed the balance. You will pay the price. Before Lyra could respond, the chamber began to shift violently. The floor cracked open, and massive metal constructs, resembling enormous humanoid figures, began to rise from the ground. Their eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and their movements were precise and terrifying. Lyra and Noah ran, but the Guardians were fast. They had no choice but to fight back. Lyra shouted for her people to retreat, but the Guardians followed them, relentless and unstoppable. The Lyrians had no weapons that could match the Guardians' power. It was clear now that this place had not been built for salvation. It had been a prison, a way to keep something dangerous contained. As the Guardians advanced, Lyra realized that the Lyrians were not ready for this battle. They had barely survived the Council's forces, and now they were facing an ancient and terrifying enemy. The only hope they had was to use the knowledge they had gained, to find a way to outsmart the Guardians before it was too late. Noah, we can't fight them directly, Lyra said urgently. We need to find a way to shut them down. There must be a control room, a way to deactivate them. Noah nodded, his face grim. Let's find it. Fast. Together, they sprinted through the dark corridors of the facility, hoping to reach the control room before the Guardians caught up with them. The fate of the Lyrians, and humanity, depended on what happened next. Lyra and Noah ran through the dark, narrow hallways of the facility, the sound of the Guardians' heavy footsteps echoing behind them. Every corner they turned, every door they opened, seemed to lead them deeper into the heart of the machine. Their time was running out, and they had no choice but to find the control room before the Guardians reached them. Do you see anything? Lyra gasped, her breath coming in short bursts as they sprinted down another corridor. She glanced over her shoulder, fear in her eyes, but there was no sign of the Guardians yet. "No, no," said, his voice tense. "But we can't stop. We'll find it. We have to." They kept moving, pushing forward despite the growing sense of dread. The deeper they went into the facility, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the low hum of the machines felt like it was vibrating in their very bones. After what felt like hours of running, they finally found a small control room tucked away in a corner of the facility. The door was heavy, but Noah managed to force it open. Inside, the room was filled with rows of terminals and screens, all flickering with activity. Lyra quickly moved to one of the terminals and began to search for the system that controlled the Guardians. Noah stood guard by the door, his senses on high alert. The sound of the Guardians' footsteps grew louder, and he knew they didn't have much time. "Found it," Lyra exclaimed, her fingers flying over the controls. The screen in front of her flickered to life, displaying a series of complex commands and codes. She hesitated for a moment, realizing that the system was far more advanced than anything she had ever seen. But she had no choice. She had to trust her instincts. "Lyra, hurry," Noah urged, his voice filled with urgency. "They're getting closer." With a deep breath, Lyra pressed a series of buttons, hoping that she was on the right track. The screen flashed a warning, and for a moment, it looked like she had made a mistake. But then, a new message appeared: "Guardian systems offline." She let out a sigh of relief, but there was no time to celebrate. The facility began to shake, and the lights flickered. The Guardians, sensing their power being drained, let out a loud mechanical roar. The walls trembled as the machines powered down, their red eyes dimming. "We did it," Noah said, his voice filled with awe. "But we need to get out of here before this place collapses." Lyra nodded, her heart still racing. They couldn't waste another second. She quickly gathered the team, and they made their way back to the ship. The Guardians were no longer a threat, but the facility was unstable. It was only a matter of time before the entire place would collapse under the strain. As they reached the ship, Lyra turned to Noah. "We've done it. We've taken the first step." Noah smiled, but there was a sense of quiet understanding between them. "This is just the beginning, Lyra. The galaxy is about to change." With the Guardians deactivated and the hidden secrets of the Lyrians unlocked, they were ready to return to Sci-Fi. But now, they had a new challenge ahead of them: spreading the news of their victory and uniting the galaxy against the Council. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt hope. The Lyrians were no longer forgotten. Their future was in their own hands. The journey back to Sci-Fi was filled with a quiet sense of triumph, but also a deep understanding that their work was far from finished. Lyra sat at the ship's controls, her eyes fixed on the distant stars as the planet Sci-Fi loomed closer. Noah sat beside her, watching her closely. There was a certain calm to Lyra now, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. The Lyrians had faced overwhelming odds, but they had made it through. They had won the first battle, but the war for their future was just beginning. When they landed on Sci-Fi, the atmosphere was different. The air felt fresher, and the people who had once seemed hopeless were now filled with energy. The discovery of the ancient facility, the defeat of the Guardians, and the reactivation of their ancient technology had done something to them. It was as if the Lyrians had awoken from a long slumber. Their eyes now sparkled with determination, and their hearts beat with renewed purpose. Lyra stepped off the ship and was greeted by the cheers of her people. They had been waiting for her return, and when they saw that she was alive, and that they had succeeded, their joy was overwhelming. "We've done it," Lyra said, standing tall before her people, Noah at her side. "This is just the beginning. Together, we can build a new future. Together, we will reclaim what was taken from us." The crowd roared with approval, their voices echoing through the land. They had been exiled, forgotten by the galaxy. But now, they had the strength to fight back, to stand tall once more. The galaxy would soon know that the Lyrians were a force to be reckoned with. Noah looked at Lyra, his expression proud but thoughtful. "We can't do this alone, Lyra. We'll need allies. We'll need to bring together those who still believe in justice." Lyra nodded. She knew Noah was right. The galaxy had to see that the Lyrians were more than just a defeated race. They were strong, resourceful, and united. And they were not alone. Together, with humanity's help, they could face the Galactic Council and whatever forces opposed them. The next few months were spent preparing for the future. Lyra and Noah worked tirelessly to build diplomatic relations with other races. Slowly, they began to gather allies, other planets that had suffered under the Council's rule, other species that had been silenced. Lyra traveled to distant worlds, speaking to leaders and making connections. Noah's influence and humanity's role in their victory became a key part of their strategy. As the Lyrians prepared to fight, something changed in the galaxy. The Council had once been the unquestioned authority, but now they were under threat. The news of the Lyrians' success spread quickly, and the galaxy began to take notice. The marginalized race, once dismissed, had found their voice, and it was powerful. Lyra stood at the forefront of this new era, with Noah by her side. They had built a legacy of unity, of strength, and of hope. The fight for their future was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Lyra believed they could win. The Lyrians were no longer exiled. They were a force, and the galaxy would soon know their name. The stars had once seemed so distant, but now they were within reach. The future was theirs to shape.